I never thought a stupid drinking game would blow up my entire life, but here we are. One careless comment about my past hookups, and suddenly my husband can't even remember why he married me. I'm Olivia, 32, and I'm about to tell you how I accidentally nuked my marriage in under 10 seconds. It was just supposed to be a fun Saturday night. Eddie and I rarely get to go out anymore since Isabel was born, so when our friends invited us over for dinner and drinks, we jumped at the chance. Eddie's mom was thrilled to babysit Isabel. She's always begging for more grandma time anyway. We were having such a good time. The food was great, the drinks were flowing, and for once I didn't feel like just Isabel's mom or Eddie's wife. I felt like my old self again. Maybe that's why I let my guard down when someone suggested playing Never Have I Ever. Things were going fine until Mike said, "Never have I ever hooked up with someone whose name I can't remember." Most people didn't drink, but I took a big swig. Without thinking. Then Tasha asked how many times that had happened, and that's when I said it. "Girl, I can't even remember half my hookups," I laughed. Then I made it worse by adding, "But the other half? Sometimes I still dream about them." The room went dead silent. I remember Tasha's eyes going wide and Mike suddenly becoming very interested in refilling drinks. But it was Eddie's face that should have been my warning. He didn't look angry. He just looked blank, like he was seeing me for the first time. He recovered quickly, made some joke about how he must have been pretty memorable then, and everyone laughed awkwardly before changing the subject. I thought we'd moved past it. The drive home should have been my second clue. Eddie was quiet. Not the comfortable silence of a couple married for 5 years, but the heavy kind that feels like something's brewing. When I asked if everything was okay, he just said, "Sure, just tired." Classic Eddie. Always keeping it together. Always the mature one. I met Eddie 5 years ago when my life was completely different. I was working retail at the mall, partying too much, and dating all the wrong guys. Eddie came into the store looking for a gift for his mom. He wasn't my usual type. Too put together. Too responsible, but there was something about the way he carried himself, confident but not cocky. When he asked for my number, I surprised myself by giving him my real one. Our first date wasn't at some trendy bar. He took me to a small Italian restaurant where the owner knew him by name. He talked about his job at the car dealership, how he'd started washing cars in high school and worked his way up to sales consultant. He had plans, ambition. He listened when I talked, actually remembered details about my life. No guy had ever paid that kind of attention before. I fell hard and fast. Within 6 months, we were living together. By our 1-year anniversary, I was pregnant with Isabel. It wasn't planned, but Eddie never hesitated. He proposed 3 weeks after we found out, saying he'd been saving for a ring anyway. The next morning after the party, I expected Eddie to bring up my comment, maybe tease me about it. That's how we usually handle things, joke until it's not a big deal anymore. But he didn't mention it at all. He got up early, made breakfast for Isabel, and went through his Sunday routine like normal. Except, he barely looked at me. Over the next few days, the distance grew. Eddie came home from the dealership later than usual. When I asked about his day, he gave short answers. When he played with Isabel, he was the same loving dad he'd always been. But once she went to bed, he'd find reasons to avoid being alone with me. A week after the party, I found him sitting on our bed, staring at our wedding photo. When he noticed me watching, he set it down and went to take a shower without saying a word. It was just a stupid comment about my past. Why was he acting like I committed some terrible betrayal? I was starting to get annoyed with his silent treatment. After all, he knew I wasn't exactly a saint when we met. It's not like I hid my dating history. I decided to wait up for him that night. When he finally came to bed, I reached for him, determined to reconnect physically if he wouldn't talk to me. For a moment, he responded, but then he stopped suddenly, rolled away, and said he was too tired. After 2 weeks of Eddie's emotional distance, I was going crazy. I tried everything to get us back to normal. I cooked his favorite meals, wore the lingerie he bought me last Christmas, even suggested we take a weekend trip. Nothing worked. "Babe, what's going on with you?" I finally asked one night. "Is this still about what I said at the party?" It was just a stupid joke. Eddie looked at me for a long moment. "Do you really not get why that might bother me, hearing my wife joke about dreaming about other men?" "Oh my God, I didn't mean it literally," I said, rolling my eyes. I was drunk and trying to be funny. Why are you being so sensitive? It's not about being sensitive, Olivia. It's about respect. He got up from the couch. I'm gonna bed. I have an early meeting tomorrow. That night, lying awake beside my silent husband, I reinstalled Tinder on my phone. I told myself I was just curious, just wanted to see who was out there. I wasn't going to message anyone. I just needed something to make me feel wanted again, but of course, the matches started coming in immediately. Guys telling me how pretty I was, how they couldn't believe someone like me was on Tinder. It felt good to be appreciated, even if it was just shallow compliments from strangers. I set up my profile with pics that didn't show my face clearly and used my middle name. I wasn't really cheating, I reasoned. Just looking for a little ego boost while Eddie figured out whatever issue he was having. The next morning, he left before I woke up. I found a note saying he'd taken Isabel to daycare and I should pick her up since he had to work late. Again, that's when the first real message came through on Tinder. A guy named Jared who said my smile was gorgeous and wanted to know what I was looking for. Before I could overthink it, I typed back, just some fun conversation. My life's a little boring right now. We chatted all morning while I was supposed to be folding laundry. He was funny and flirty, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. When he asked for more pictures, I hesitated only briefly before sending one in the new dress I bought that Eddie hadn't even noticed. Jared loved it. Asked for more. I sent another, a little more revealing. The rush of excitement I felt was addictive. Soon I was chatting with several guys, sending increasingly provocative photos basking in their attention. You've been on your phone a lot lately, Eddie mentioned casually one evening as we sat watching TV, not really watching together. My heart raced stopped just talking to Tasha about plans for Isabel's birthday. The lie came easily. Too easily. He nodded but gave me that look, the one that said he wasn't buying it but didn't have the energy to argue. I pulled my phone closer and changed my Tinder notifications to silent. The next few weeks fell into a pattern, Eddie and I coexisting rather than living together. Me turning to my phone whenever he wasn't around. I started taking more care with my appearance, not for Eddie, but for the photos I was sending to strangers. I told myself it wasn't real cheating if I never met these men in person. But the messages got more explicit. The photos more revealing. The lies bigger. I password protected my phone. Started deleting message histories. Created a secret email account. All the while, Eddie grew more distant. Do you ever think about where we went wrong? He asked me one night out of nowhere, "What do you mean?" "We're fine," I said automatically, though we both knew it was a lie. "Are we?" He looked at me like he was trying to find something he'd lost. "I don't think I know who you are anymore, Olivia." That night, I crossed a line I hadn't before. I sent one of my Tinder matches photos I never share with anyone but my husband. Photos that left nothing to the imagination. The whole time, I kept telling myself, this is Eddie's fault. He drove me to this with his coldness. I never expected Eddie to go through my phone. In our 5 years together, we'd always respected each other's privacy. That was our unspoken rule. So I got careless. I stopped closing the apps when I set my phone down. I didn't bother deleting messages right away. I was in the shower taking extra time with my hair because one of my Tinder guys had asked for fresh photos. Eddie had been acting weird all day, quieter than usual, watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. When I came out wrapped in a towel, I found him sitting at our kitchen table, my phone in front of him, screen lit up. My stomach dropped. I knew instantly. His face said it all. Calm, controlled, but his eyes were full of something I'd never seen before. Not just anger or hurt, but a cold certainty. "Had a good shower?" he asked, his voice terrifyingly even. "What are you doing with my phone?" I tried to sound outraged, but my voice came out thin and shaky. Funny. That's not the first question I expected. He turned my phone around. On the screen was my Tinder chat with Jared, including all the photos I'd sent him. I was thinking you might start with an explanation for this. For a split second, I considered confessing everything, begging for forgiveness. But then a strange defensive anger took over. How dare he go through my private messages? This wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been so cold to me. This was his fault. You went through my phone. I grabbed it from the table, clutching my towel with my other hand. What is wrong with you? That's private? Eddie didn't react to my outburst. He just sat there, unnervingly calm. Private. That's interesting, Olivia. I didn't realize marriage included private online relationships with other men. You're twisting everything. My voice was getting louder. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been ignoring me for weeks. What was I supposed to do? I don't know, he said, his voice still level. Maybe talk to your husband instead of sending nude photos to strangers on Tinder? Don't you dare judge me, I was nearly shouting no. You've been treating me like I'm invisible since that stupid party. You checked out of this marriage weeks ago and now you're trying to make me the bad guy? I was processing something hurtful, my wife said. You are cheating. He stood up and I noticed several papers on the table, screenshots. He'd taken screenshots of everything. And not just with one guy, Olivia. How many were there? 5? 6 that. I found in just 20 minutes. Going through my phone is disgusting. I screamed, completely ignoring his question. You're a controlling creep. You probably planned this, waiting for me to slip up so you could catch me and play the victim. A small noise from the hallway made us both turn. Isabel stood there in her pajamas, eyes wide and frightened. Her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest. Mommy, why are you yelling at Daddy? Eddie walked over and picked her up. It's okay, belly beans. Let's get you back to sleep. I stood frozen in the kitchen, gripping my phone as Eddie carried our daughter back to her room. I heard him talking softly to her, probably making up some comforting lie about why Mommy was screaming at Daddy in the middle of the night. When he came back, his face had changed. There was no more anger, just a profound weariness. You know what the sad part is? He said quietly. I was actually convincing myself that I was overreacting to what you said at the party. That maybe I was being too sensitive. I was going to apologize to you tonight. I should have seized that moment. Should have apologized, begged for another chance. But the defensive rage was still burning too hot. So this is all because I made one joke about my past? You're that insecure that you had to punish me for weeks, then invade my privacy to find something to be mad about? Eddie sighed and gathered the screenshots into a neat pile. It was never about your past, Olivia. It was about hearing my wife joke about dreaming of other men in front of our friends. It was disrespectful. But I was working through it. He looked up at me. This though? This isn't a careless comment. This is a deliberate choice you made over and over again. If you had just... No, he cut me off. There's no justification for this. Not my reaction to your comment. Not feeling ignored. Nothing. You chose to do this instead of working on our marriage. So what now? I asked, suddenly afraid of the answer. I'm taking Isabel to my parents tomorrow, he said. We need some space, and she doesn't need to be around. You can't take my daughter. I was panicking now, the reality of what was happening finally breaking through. Our daughter, he corrected. And yes, I can. You can see her whenever you want, but I'm not staying here right now. The next morning, Eddie was gone before I woke up. He'd left a note saying he'd taken Isabel to daycare and would pick her up later. I called his cell 5 times, but he didn't answer. I left increasingly angry voicemails, demanding he come home, accusing him of kidnapping our daughter, threatening to tell everyone what a controlling, privacy-invading husband he was. By evening, I was frantic. Eddie finally texted to say he and Isabel were safe at his parents' house and that he'd bring her by to get some clothes and toys tomorrow. I called my sister-in-law, Vanessa, immediately. She and I had been close. Since Eddie and I started dating, she would understand, would help me talk some sense into him. Hey, V, I said when she answered. Have you talked to Eddie? Yeah, she replied, her voice unusually cool. He's at Mom and Dad's with Isabel. Did he tell you what happened? I asked, hoping Eddie had kept the details to himself. A pause. He showed. Use everything, Liv. My stomach dropped. Everything? The screenshots, the conversations, the pictures, everything. Her voice was flat, disappointed. He had no right to go through my phone, I insisted. And those are private messages he had no business sharing with anyone. Are you serious right now? Vanessa's voice rose slightly. You're worried about privacy after what you did? Those weren't just some flirty texts, Olivia. I saw what you sent those men. He drove me to it. I cried. He's been treating me like I don't exist for weeks. I don't. No, maybe talk to your husband or a therapist? Literally anyone besides random men on Tinder? She sighed heavily. Look, I love you. Your family, but I can't believe you're trying to justify this. My own family wasn't much better. When I called my sister giving her my carefully edited version of events, she wasn't buying it. Live. She finally said, "Has Eddie ever given you reason not to trust him before this?" "No, but..." "So what made this time different? Why would he suddenly start checking your phone unless he had reason to be suspicious?" I felt a flash of betrayal. "Are you taking his side too?" "I got a call from Eddie this morning," she admitted. "He sent me some of the screenshots. Not the photos, just the conversations. He had no right." I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. "Olivia, listen to yourself." My sister rarely raised her voice, but she was now. "You're more upset about your privacy than the fact that you betrayed your husband." After almost a month of this limbo, I texted Eddie asking if we could meet to talk. I suggested the diner where we used to go for breakfast every Sunday before Isabel was born, thinking the nostalgia might help my case. When he walked in, my heart skipped. He looked good. Tired around the eyes, maybe, but still handsome in that understated way that had first attracted me to him. "Eddie, I want to apologize," I began, having rehearsed this carefully. "What I did was wrong. I've deleted all the apps, blocked all those guys. It won't happen again." He studied me for a moment. "I appreciate that, Lave, but I need to know, what exactly are you sorry for?" The question caught me off guard. "For the Tinder stuff, obviously. For talking to those guys. And why was it wrong?" He pressed. I frowned, feeling defensive. "Because it upset you," Eddie sighed and leaned back. "Not because it was a betrayal of our marriage vows? Not because it was cheating? I told you, I never physically. I know what you didn't do. You cut me off. I'm asking about what you did do." "Fine." "Yes, it was wrong," I said, irritation creeping into my voice. "I shouldn't have done it. Can we move forward now?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out, Olivia. Can we?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Because I'm not sure we want the same things anymore. What does that mean?" My heart was pounding now. "I think we have fundamentally different views on commitment and respect." His voice was gentle but firm. "What happened?" "Your comment at the party." "My reaction?" "Your response to my reaction?" It showed me that it was one mistake. I protested. "Everyone makes mistakes." "It wasn't just one mistake, though," he said. "It was a pattern of choices that revealed how you really feel about our marriage." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. "I think we need a more formal separation while we figure things out." I stared at the envelope without touching it. "What is that?" "Separation agreement?" "It covers living arrangements, expenses, and a temporary custody schedule for Isabel." "Custody schedule?" I repeated numbly. "You can't be serious." "You promised me forever," I said, my voice breaking. "What happened to that?" "You happened to it," he said quietly, not unkindly. "And until you can really see that, nothing will change." A week later, I received divorce papers. The reality hit me hard. This was real. Eddie was divorcing me. There were paragraphs about property division, custody arrangements, child support calculations, cold, legal language to dismantle the life we'd built together. By the time the divorce was finalized, 6 months later, I moved into a smaller apartment closer to work. Eddie had gotten his promotion to finance manager at the dealership. We settled into a routine with Isabel. She stayed with Eddie during the weekend with me most weekends. I tried dating again, but it wasn't the same. Before Eddie, I dated for fun, for the thrill of someone new wanting me. Now every date felt hollow compared to what I'd had with Eddie. It was at Isabel's school open house that I saw him with someone new. I spotted them immediately. Eddie sitting in the second row with Isabel bouncing excitedly next to him. And beside Isabel was a woman I didn't recognize, her head bent close to my daughter's as they looked at something in Isabel's hands. "Mommy?" Isabel squealed, waving frantically. "Come see my drawing." As Isabel proudly displayed her artwork, Eddie stood up. "Olivia, this is Lauren," he said, gesturing to the woman. "Lauren, this is Isabel's mom, Olivia." "Nice to meet you," Lauren said with a genuine smile. "Isabel talks about you all the time. Lauren works at the dealership," Eddie explained, "in the accounting department." Throughout the presentation, I couldn't help noticing how comfortable they seemed together. The three of them like a ready-made family. At one point, Isabel whispered something to Lauren, who laughed and whispered back, both of them giggling together. Eddie watched them with an expression of contented affection I recognized all too well. He used to look at me like that. Lauren's making pancakes for breakfast, Isabel informed me later, with chocolate chips. That sounds delicious, I managed to say, avoiding Eddie's eyes. I made it to my car before the tears came. I sat in the dark parking lot, struck by the realization that Eddie had truly moved on. He'd meant it when he said our marriage was over. The next time I dropped Isabel back at Eddie's, Lauren's car was in the driveway. Eddie stepped onto the porch after Isabel ran inside. Look, Olivia, I wasn't going to say anything yet, but I think you should hear it from me. Lauren and I are talking about moving in together. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. Oh, it won't change anything with our custody arrangement, he assured me quickly. I see, I swallowed hard. And Isabel, she's okay with this? She loves Lauren, Eddie said, his voice gentle. They get along really well. That's great. I blinked back tears. I'm happy for you, Dot. As I drove away, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding for months. This was real. This was permanent. My marriage was over, and it was my fault. Not Eddie's for being hurt by my careless words. Not Eddie's for needing space to process that hurt. Not Eddie's for refusing to overlook my betrayal. Mine, the realization, was both painful and strangely freeing. Painful because it meant accepting that I couldn't blame anyone else for where I'd ended up. Freeing because maybe if I could acknowledge my role in destroying my marriage, I could avoid making the same mistakes in the future. But even as I had this moment of clarity, a stubborn, defensive part of me still whispered, if he'd really loved me, he would have fought harder. If he'd been more understanding about that stupid comment, none of this would have happened. And I knew then that while I might be starting to see my responsibility, I hadn't fully embraced it. Not yet, maybe not ever. Because it was easier to think that someday I'd find someone who would accept me completely, flaws, careless words, defensive reactions, and all, than to admit that acceptance without accountability isn't love. It's enabling, and Eddie had loved me too much to enable my worst behaviors. Meanwhile, across town, my daughter was drawing family pictures that no longer included me in the same home. And as much as I wanted to blame Eddie for that too, deep down I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet.